Time for Gear Evil. My thoughts exactly. After reaching his peak, I don't know how much further upwards we can push Luffy's powers, but what we can do is we can expand laterally. Like how Gear 4th got a bunch of variants with Tank Man and Snake Man, and look, at this point in One Piece, Eiichiro Oda can make a reasonable excuse to do whatever the crap it is he wants to do with Luffy. So the only real question we have to ask ourselves here is whether or not Oda thinks that a cartoon Devil Luffy would be a fun idea to draw, and I am personally hoping that he does think that. Imu can physically turn his enemies into allies, while Luffy can spiritually turn his enemies into allies. And someone else in the comments replied to this with domination versus liberation, which I really like. As identified all the way back in the pre-time skip era by Mr. Mihawk, Luffy has the most dangerous ability on the planet, which is to turn everyone around him into an ally. He just has a certain charm that can warm people's hearts and make them believe in something better than the thing it is they have right now. So it is quite rightfully horrifying in this chapter to see Imu being capable of that same power. Because it may not feel like it, but we need that power to win almost every conflict that the Straw Hats have ever engaged in. There's a lot of emphasis put on the individual strength of the crew as well as their belief in Luffy, but the stuff that really wins battles are the small elements. Like Saitama joining the raid and turning all the Smile users, or Gyatso and his men on Dressrosa protecting Luffy from Doflamingo for 10 minutes because he needed a sweet Haki recharge, or Pecom's flipping sides at the last second on Whole Cake Island to save Luffy's life after the fight against Katakuri, and even Dory and Broggy. They've been turned into demons now, not good, because they were essential for our success on Egghead Island. The Straw Hats are the bricks, but all of these minor characters are the mortar that holds everything together. Without them, our crew would have gotten absolutely nowhere, and without them in the future, they won't be going anywhere. This has been the true X factor that has allowed Luffy to get this far. It's an effect that no other pirate can replicate. With the possible exception of maybe Blackbeard, but Imu possessing the inverse of this power to take command of people against their will is an infinitely bigger problem than you may initially realize. Because if Imu can remove our allies, if Imu can remove our mortar, then our Straw Hat house has already collapsed. So that fictional idea shakes me to my very real core. But this is also the inverse of something that I've been talking about ever since we saw Bonnie access Onika form. I suspected, and still do suspect, that Luffy is capable of giving anyone access to their most free incarnation, and that by the end of One Piece we are going to have a ton of joy people just bouncing all over the planet. But Imu here is showing the opposite, that he can give everyone access to their most trapped incarnations, their most confined, their most not free. So look, I'm not sure, is our way out of this for Luffy to get Dory and Broggy to achieve their Nika forms and liberate themselves from Imu? I know the idea sounds completely absurd at this stage, but I'm not sure what else overcomes maximum confinement other than maximum liberation. And there's also, I think, a comparison drawn between Imu's abilities and Luffy's Gear 5th in Broggy's dialogue in this chapter. After being transformed into a demon, Broggy says that it feels like he can do anything and that it's exhilarating, which is very similar to what Luffy said in chapter 1044 after unlocking Gear 5th. He said, "Ooh, I can do everything I want to do," which makes what Imu's doing here that much more dangerous, because he is giving you a false sense of freedom. He is injecting you with power juice and giving you a rush so big that you don't realize the walls that have been built around you. And just a minor note of conspiracy here. Did Mr. Mihawk comment on Luffy's ability all of the way back during Marineford because he knows something about what Imu can do? And having seen what Imu can do, is he seeing what Luffy can does and going, that's pretty powerful? I mean, look, probably not, because this idea hinges entirely on the fact that Mihawk and Imu have the same eyes, but you know, it's just something to throw out there and think about. I think the Reversi part of Domi Reversi is also heavily based on the board game Reversi. Alright, I 100% missed this because in Australia we do have this game, but it's called Othello. But this makes infinitely more sense now because of the part where Dory gets transformed and then everyone standing in between Dory and Broggy, they instantly get flipped as well, which are the rules of the game. Any discs in a straight line between two discs of the opposing color get flipped, and that is what automatically happens to the giant standing in between Dory and Broggy, which is very fun because Imu's powers do have rules in this case, and given that this game has 2 players, that means it may be possible to use those rules against Imu strategically, to be able to flip the giants back to their white side somehow. And this arc could really end up just turning into one big board game. And the fact that Emu's abilities are based on a game does add more to the idea that Emu is a child frozen in time. Although in this chapter, I must say that Emu handles himself with quite a degree of maturity, instantly recognizing what the best way to handle this situation is, which I like because if you're going to have a character who is, the ruler of the world, then that character better have the brain to back that up. Seeing how demonic Emu can be in this chapter, you can only imagine how terrifying Joy Boy must have been with his use of Haki and Gear 5th to be able to scare and traumatize such a character. Alright, so this is a bold prediction based on the nothing we know right now, but I feel like Emu is going to turn out to be a lot less threatening once we really dive down to his core. Sort of like the Wizard of Oz, a man behind the curtain. Although I might be a bit biased here at the moment because I've recently heard that there is a life-size Emu plushie being released, and it is 92 centimeters tall, which is about 3 feet for the Americans, Myanmar, and Liberia, the only 3 countries in the world to not use the proper system. But 92 centimeters, it is not a lot. And so bro is like this tall. It doesn't even reach the camera. It's this tall. Emu is about this tall. Are we not going to talk about how Harold may have been emued and reversied? And that's why Loki and perhaps even Jarl had to kill him, even at his own behest fighting against the demon. The damage in the castle was pretty cray-cray. So that is incredibly possible. I guess it would mean that either Gunko or another avatar of Emu has been to Elbaf in order to carry that out. And I would get why neither Loki nor Jarl would have spoken the truth of what happened, because we cannot have the people remembering Elbaf's revolutionary and beloved king as a vicious demon. But it would imply that Loki and Jarl actually found a way to kill someone with one of these immortal bodies, which I'm not too sure about. I'm also hoping that it's not that, because dude being controlled by an evil entity is kind of a cop-out answer. I get that it would keep the legacy of Harold pure, but I want a bit more substance to it than that. Oda's writing tends to hit hardest when he's able to create a very human reason behind the very tragic actions, and we've already done the whole being controlled by an evil entity thing with King Riku on Dressrosa. Doflamingo puppeteered him into slaughtering his people, so I'm not hugely keen to go down the same path with Harold. I'm definitely hoping for a more unique situation. But the closer that One Piece does get to this flat-out good versus evil concept, the more likely it does become that, sure, Harold being Domi Reversi could be the answer. And this even opens up the very, very awkward discussion of the 5 elders potentially having once been people who were good at heart before Emu came to the throne. We don't know the specifics of their transformation. It might not be the same thing at all, but Emu can corrupt people's hearts in the same way that Luffy can liberate them. And that means that someone like St. J. Garcia Saturn could have at one point been a humble scientist just looking to help the world and create some smiles, much like Vegapunk. But after being corrupted by evil, he became obsessed with creating diseases and inflicting nothing but pain on the world. I'm not sure if that's off the table, and there may be a future where we have a flashback of the 5 Elder Stars and we actually start feeling kinda sorry for them. Robin is looking like the crew member most likely to be Domi Reversi. Alright, so here's what happens. Emu flips her, and she comes out looking exactly the same. Nothing's changed. Because she's already seen the greatest evil that this world has to offer, and then Emu makes the Enel face after meeting his natural counter. I think Emu will definitely be used as a comedic villain to fight against Luffy. When I first saw Gear 5th versus Kaido, I immediately thought, oh, so he's Bugs Bunny now. And this chapter finally gives us his double-barrel shotgun-wielding rival, Elmer Fudd. You know, now that you've said it, I need to see this happen. I didn't even go there with the shotgun, but mate, you are so right. If our destiny is to go full Looney Tunes, and I would love to see it, I'm all on board. And it would work because Emu is very much the straight man in this piece. He's taking things seriously, very seriously, which is Elmer Fudd's role, whilst Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck tend to steal all the comedic moments.
I'm giving you till the count of 5 to apologize to me publicly for calling me stupid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The bit that confuses me is why Emu is giving attention to Elbaf whilst Marijois is under attack and on fire. So that's a very good question, and I would definitely love to know more about what's happening there. But part of this may be because of the mindset of being a god, or trying to project yourself as a god, and how not godly of an act it is to admit defeat and retreat in the face of these mere mortals. If Emu rocked up to Elbaf and was all like, you guys, come help me. The bad people are burning my city, and I need Saint Summers to help me, a god. If Emu was to do that, then it just wouldn't look very good. So Emu has to aggressively defend his status as a god, even in the face of multiple crises. But what I'm also thinking is that Emu's solution is actually quite efficient. He's completely flipped this conflict, and he probably believes that settling it won't take too long, after which point the plan may be to teleport the demon giants to the Holy Land in order to have them help fight whoever's attacking them. The fact that Sanji is unable to sense Robin and Nami being captured and hurt shows just how big Elbaf is. So yeah, usually Sanji does have this special ability to sense when and where a woman is in danger. We've seen him use it many times, notably with Tashigi on Punk Hazard, and most recently with Bonnie on Egghead Island. He calls it his Lady Radar, and it does have a pretty incredibly impressive range. But Elbaf is so big that right now the Straw Hats are technically in two different worlds. All of the stuff happening with Emu and the Holy Knights is happening in the Sun World, whilst Team Loki are in the Underworld. And I do quite like this because it's a pretty great way of honoring the inspiration of Yggdrasil and the separation of the 9 worlds in Norse mythology. What are the chances Jewelry Bonnie could use her devil fruit to change the giants to normal? With how wild this arc has been, I feel like that seems like one of the only solutions to the life cost. So I'd say the chances that she could are pretty good, but the chances that she will are pretty bad. Because Bonnie is one of those awkward Trafalgar Law kind of characters that Oda needs to put some big barriers around to stop them automatically being the solution to every problem. Although it would be very interesting to see Bonnie try and use her powers on Tori and Broggy only for them to not work, because perhaps devil fruits cannot override the power of an actual devil. However, if Bonnie does end up at least seeing the demon giants, then she could probably use her abilities to make alternate demonic versions of everyone, because she knows that it's possible now, she believes in it. And when Bonnie transforms people, they get their alternate future bodies, but they keep their current minds. So there's something to be said for transforming people into immortal demonic forms. It does sound pretty useful, but it probably won't happen. I'm still interested in why Gunko's hair grew when she's being possessed by Emu. In all her other appearances, she had short hair. Maybe Emu just prefers women with long hair. Although what I will say for the long hair is that artistically it does mature Gunko's appearance a fair bit. The short hair combined with the school uniform does give off a very juvenile vibe, whereas the long hair adds those implied years of growth and makes us take this form a bit more seriously as the supreme authority of the planet. This is where we need Vice Admiral Suru to wash the evil right back out of these naughty, naughty demon giants. Suru does seem like a pretty natural counter to this. In case you don't know or don't remember, Vice Admiral Suru has the wash fruit, turning her into a laundry human who's able to clean the hearts of the people who she hangs out to dry. So a lot of the miscellaneous pirates she runs into end up becoming model citizens afterwards. However, it is specifically mentioned that Suru can only clean out a limited amount of evil. So if someone is real bad, then it would be like trying to clean a sewer with a toothbrush and a tiny little thing of toothpaste that you got from an airport bathroom. Not very effective. So I don't think she'd be able to do much against anyone targeted by Emu. It's too much evil. We're talking 100% evil, and Suru could probably only wash away like 1%, which it isn't nothing, and it does open the door of potential. But she's not here anyway, so no, it doesn't matter. Yamato's cover story is not over yet. Ulti is holding the hat that Yamato said they delivered to Kawamatsu. There's still room for shenaniganry. Yeah, it is definitely not over. When cover stories end, they say final part. Although this one's a bit deceptive because it does say pilgrimage complete. But Yamato's journey around Wano is not complete yet. If you look at Kinemon's travel itinerary, the X marks where we currently are in Hakumai to deliver Yasu's blade. And after that, Yamato still has to go through Ringo and then back to the flower capital. And before that, as the commenter said, we've got to give this hat to Kawamatsu, who is in Hakumai. So I imagine that we'll be seeing him on the next cover. Does this mean Emu is the forest god from the second world in the Harley text? Because he tamed/called demons? Alright, so demon taming is mentioned in the Harley text. The second world text begins with, "Within the void there was a breath. The forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war." However, this may not necessarily refer to Emu. It could also be someone or something taming the demonic remnants that were created by Emu or whoever held these powers prior to Emu. As in, all of these demons already existed because of these powers, but another entity managed to break through to them to remove some of that demonicosity. Which I only say because the first world also seems to be covered in demons and enslavement as well. And in fact, there are these shadowy demonic creatures seen in the Elbaf mural, one of which is suspected to be Emu, but all three of them could end up being demons created by Emu and this ability. But also in the Harley text, it mentions the Earth God and the Sea God, the latter of which I think fits Emu a bit better at the moment, because at the end of the Second World, the Sea God storms, which very much sounds like the Great Flood of the Void Century. In total, this many gods are mentioned, 4. We have the earth, the forest, the sea, and the sun. And we know who the sun god is, and we also have a pretty okay idea for the sea god. I'd be surprised if it wasn't Emu. But when it comes to earth and forest, it looks like we do still have 2 more lurking legends out there. Mr. One Piece / Hunter x Hunter commentator man, I'm surprised you didn't compare Emu's grimoire to Crollo's Nen ability. Alright, so for non-Hunter x Hunter fans, firstly, watch the anime or read the manga, you'll like it. But secondly, this refers to a character named Crollo Lucifer, who can steal the powers of others after completing an arse ton of painful restrictions, and then what he can do, right, is open his funky book to any page and activate the ability on that page. I talk about this a lot on my New World Review channel, which is all about Hunter x Hunter, but Emu may be doing something similar here, opening the book to a certain page to use the ability on that book. So for example, we flip to the page with Domi Reversi. Out comes the 2 items needed to start the game, a stabby knife and huge shotgun. And it's probably at this point that I should bring this up. 10 years ago, it was alleged that the ending of One Piece was leaked by a Shueisha employee. And 10 years ago, the ending did exist because Oda has told the ending of One Piece to every editor he's had ever since the very beginning. And this was completely dismissed in 2015 because it just sounded ridiculous. Remembering that at the time we were just finishing Dressrosa, but this leaked ending stated that the climax of One Piece would feature a huge war against the quote devil and his army versus Luffy and his extended fleet of pirates. And furthermore, it stated that this devil would have access to all devil fruit powers, which I wouldn't put past Emu having within his grimoire. And mate, I have to say that this leak isn't looking anywhere near as insane as it sounded 10 years ago, and there's also a lot more to it than what I've said, many more details, so please do keep an eye on this here channel, as a video will be released analyzing the full quote-unquote leak, and just beware because yes, this could all be a bunch of nothing, but it could also be a bit of something. And if you click on that video, the ending of One Piece may actually be spoiled for you.